Hi everybody, welcome to Old Warden. Thank you for coming. I'm privileged to fly the Bristol fighter, subject of a brief chat this morning, and Andy Preslent, who was originally an apprentice here many years ago. The number of years, I guess it's a little secret, I guess, is it?
46.
46 years. So how many times have you actually rebuilt this aeroplane?
It was recovered at Cranfield in the 60s, and then we recovered it in the 80s. It's now due for another do.
The Bristol fighter, fascinating aeroplane. It was a total disaster in 1916 when it was first developed. In fact, its operational debut was at the Battle of Arras in 1917. This is a slightly later machine, so this didn't see any World War I service. But in the Battle of Arras early in 1917, there were 6 of these aircraft on their very first patrol over enemy territory. And as sheer bad luck would have it, Baron von Richthofen and 4 of his fellow pilots in Albatross aircraft bounced them. Now, the idea at the time and the orders from on high were that with a machine like this, you would fly in a very close formation and you would rely on your gunner to pan across and shoot down the enemy. No problem there. Utter disaster. So of the 6 aircraft that were in that very first sortie over enemy territory, 4 were shot down, the crews were killed. A 5th was very badly damaged but managed to limp home. And the 6th one, I think they decided to throw the towel over the side and were captured. As the war developed, the thinking changed because this aircraft actually proved to be a formidable fighting machine. And one of its strengths was its ability to dive at very high speed. And as Andy will be able to explain, the enemy aircraft of the time, for example, the Drydecker, the triplane, they were built to a price. So Anthony Fokker said, well, if you want them cheaper, we'll just nail the fabric on. Instead of, anyway, the top wing would come off. So if you were in trouble with the Bristol fighter, you would put the thing in a dive and then you would hopefully outrun your enemy. This particular aircraft has a fantastic history, which Andy will explain in a moment, I'm sure, because I've mugged him into doing it. But these were still in active service in the 30s. They built more than 5,000 of these. And when they were eventually withdrawn from military service, some of them were bought privately. And this particular aircraft ended up in
A garage in Hemel Hempstead, I think.
A garage in Hemel Hempstead. And a chap by the name of Ogilvy?
Yes, it's not the Ogilvy that's associated with this place. There's another chap called Ogilvy. He had the Huck starter and the back bantam as well. The Huck's is up there.
We'll explain the Huck starter in a moment.
Yeah. He had it, that was then rescued from there and rebuilt by Bristol's. And after that, it came to us pretty much. It was recovered in the 60s again. And then it was at Cranfield in the winter for a few years in the 60s. There's pictures of it and it was all silver then. That was the scheme it was in the 20s. We recovered it in the 80s and put it in the First World War scheme of the PC-10, which is pigmented cellulose number 10 for all those anoraks out there. Is what PC-10 stands for. And we've operated it ever since, really. It's had an engine change from the one that was in it. The other engine that was in this is next door. But the engine was rebuilt because that was getting tired. So we've got a Rolls-Royce Falcon, liquid-cooled V12.
275 horsepower?
220 horse.
Oh.
Yeah. And this was either the first.
I think there's a mistake on that board there.
Is it? Well, 220 as far as I know.
Okay. 220 plus VAT, yeah.
And that's probably arguably the first or second oldest flying Rolls-Royce engine in the world. There's one in New Zealand as well, an original one flying, the original engine. So it's been in operation with us now for, 50 years, really, and it's due for a recover now. It's been 30 odd years since it was done. It's getting a bit tired. And hopefully it'll come in soon and have a recover. But the engine's pretty good, so we shouldn't have to do much to that.
The engine is absolutely superb. It just ticks over like a sewing machine, and it is just lovely. You can hear the tappets ticking away. It's turning this huge propeller so slowly on idle. It's just a delightful thing to fly. from a flying perspective, it's quite challenging. And I'm sure that a lot of you will be thinking, well, kids used to fly them in really bad conditions, and you would be absolutely right. However, the attrition rate was extremely high, and I understand that more aircraft were lost through flying accidents than in combat in the First World War. We operate this aeroplane very carefully. It's not without its challenges, because there's an interesting story about this aeroplane. When the chief pilot explained to me when I was going to fly it for the first time, he said, "This is an interwind aeroplane. If you're not interwind, you soon will be." And for the pilots amongst you, you'll understand what that means. It has no brakes. Normally on later aircraft, you would have differential braking to enable you to help you steer it on the ground. None of that. So unless the wind is absolutely on the nose, this aeroplane will very gracefully point itself into wind. So then you know where the wind really was after you've made a hash of landing it. Also, it's an aeroplane that we need to be really careful with, because Andy will confirm that it's a very heavy engine in a very light airframe. The engine bearers are very light. It was landed, you understand the term flare, it was flared a little high several years ago and had a heavy landing. And the damage which was transmitted throughout the airframe was quite considerable. It bent the engine mounts, it even bent the axles, Andy, didn't it?
85-ton steel axle, it bent that. Engine bearers nodded down. Broke lots of pieces of wood inside the fuselage, because everything's held in compression, and the nodding down load, that popped all the bolts out the end of the wood, because it put a tension load, broke wires in the fuselage. Made a right mess. It took the whole thing to bits. All the wings off. All these patches are because of that. Because what happens if it whips down like that, you get compression shakes, you can get at the end of the spars, so we're very conscious of that. So it took a lot of effort for a 10-foot high, slightly careless landing. And it really did thump it down. There's a horrible video of those wheels just about, they came up that high, they're nearly touching this, because the axle did that, and these wheels are just about there.
I think in the defence of the pilot, in some way, I think the grass was a little long. I think the grass.
15-foot grass,
15-foot grass.
We've got a lot of that out there.
Yeah, that's right.
And it wasn't on the runway.
Yeah. Another interesting story about this aeroplane is that most aeroplanes of this type are very difficult to get going and to taxi. And so if you can start the thing and get it to the end of the runway, you're pretty much there. It's interesting, speaking generally about flying these old aeroplanes, we never have a dual check on them. So what we have, and I have a copy here, we call these FRCs, and they're flight reference cards. And some of you may be aware that in the war, the Air Transport Auxiliary, based down at White Waltham, they would have these similar cards so that they could hop from one aircraft to another. So we don't get to fly these aeroplanes that much. And so before we do fly the aeroplane in the show, we'll sit quietly in the cockpit and just remind ourselves of the critical numbers, like the engine RPM in the cruise, the critical temperatures and pressures. And although I'm not down to fly this aeroplane today, what I always do when I fly this aeroplane is write in big letters here, radiator. Because unusually for a light aircraft, the pilot controls the radiator shutters. And you can get to a point where if you misremember to open the radiator early enough, and you'll have to confirm this, Andy, I think you can get a temperature runaway.
Yeah, just you can't get it back.
Where if you then think, oh no, I forgot to open the radiator, you've missed you have to shut the engine down, otherwise it will cook and then it will boil. But it's a delightful aeroplane to fly. The thing that sticks in my mind is when I'm displaying the aeroplane and coming in maybe 120 miles an hour, maybe a little faster, the wires are singing, and you hear this glorious whine of this and the beautiful roar of the Rolls-Royce engine. So I pinch myself every time I'm privileged to fly one of these machines. So, what about spare parts, Andy, for this engine? I mean,
well, we've got the remnants. We've got the engine that was in this, which needs new water jackets making for it, and the reduction gear is all worn out. So we haven't actually got any spares on the shelf we can lift off.
And that's typical. That's typical of a lot of our aircraft here, where we are critically short of spare parts.
I was curious by the little pump, propeller-driven pump.
Well, I know what that is, but this man is more qualified to tell you more about it than me.
That's the Rotherham pump. These aircraft, the fuel tank is below the carb, so you'll see it on most of the First World War stuff. And all it is an air pump to pressurise the fuel tank. So prior to starting in the cockpit, you've got a hand pump to pump the fuel tanks up. There's a fuel tank under the pilot's seat. Nice, 20 gallons sitting on pressurised fuel, and another fuel tank here. This, when it's full, there's a bit of gravity feed, but not when it's half full, because the front carb's up here.
Right.
So that pressure, so you pump up 2.5 psi on a hand pump in the cockpit, and when the engine's running, there's an engine-driven pump on this one as well, and the Rotherham pump, and there's a little blow-off valve in the cockpit called a Jones valve, which holds it at 2.5 psi. And that's the same on the triplane, the Camel, 504. They've all got these little Rotherham pumps.
But because this is a fighting machine, you could reasonably expect bullet holes in the fuel tanks. And so there is a very complicated, which is it's impossible for me to explain standing here. You'd have to see it, and then I'd have to try and remember how it works. But there is a complex system of valves where you can redirect the fuel supply and repressurise.
Yeah, you can shut off any of the systems. You can shut off the air pump, you can shut off the Rotherham pump, you can shut off the hand pump, and you can shut off either tank, and you can shut off the Jones valve. There's a little pack of brass pipes and things. They're all safety wired in line, but if you lose pressure in flight, you've got to try and find out which one is not working and turn it off. And it's usually the Jones valve, unless you've had a hole in the tank, and you turn that off, and then maintain the pressure on the hand pump.
Just by pumping it with the hand pump. It's quite a long, like a stirrup pump, like this in the side of the cockpit, which disappears up your sleeve if you're not careful. But typical of the collection aircraft, this is very much an original aeroplane with a continuous history. And the SE-5A, which I'm due to fly today, but I regret that I think the wind will preclude that, actually saw wartime combat history. It actually shot down a German aircraft on the day before the armistice. So we have some treasures beyond belief here. We're talking about the operation of the Huck starter, which is the Model T Ford-derived starting machine. Andy.
As the aeroplane's got heavier and heavier to swing, because you haven't got electric start or Coffin starts or air starts, and swinging them, we swing this or Hucks it. So a chap called Mr. B.C. Hucks, first person to loop in England in the Blériot, he invented the Huck starter, which is based on the Model T car chassis, which you see up the car park there. That's the Model TT, which stands for ton truck. Because as the aeroplanes got heavier, the little car chassis wasn't strong enough, so they used the ton truck chassis. And you plug that bar, if you walk up the car park, you set the bar on the front of it, you extend it out the tubes in, plug it in there, and that turns the engine over. And as soon as it fires, this accelerates away from the starter, that twangs back.
You disengage it as soon as
it disengages itself.
Yeah.
It comes out on a bungee, so it punches out the centre shaft, and it goes in. As soon as it's fired, just like starting the old car handles, it kicks it out, that twangs back, so it's sitting about there, then you reverse backwards. Exactly. So if you ever go and look at the Model T's, they've got 3 pedals on them. Do go and have a look. You've got 3 pedals on the floor. They are nothing to do with clutch, brake and accelerator. The left-hand pedal is first and second, the middle pedal is reverse, and the right-hand pedal is brake.
Bearing in mind you've got this running in front of you, so you don't want to have a brain malfunction, do you?
There's a lovely lineup of Model T's, but go and look at the 3 pedals there, that's what they are.
And you'll see that there are wooden chocks, just in case you accidentally move the Huck starter forward instead of reverse.
You're not allowed to move the chocks until it's going backwards, because to go backwards you hold the left-hand pedal in the middle and push the middle pedal down.